We like to believe we perceive the world with perfect logical clarity, but beneath the surface, our minds are constantly managing a collision of contradictions. We operate under the supercomputer myth. We assume our brains take in objective facts and process them to make rational decisions. We assign ourselves positive labels, firmly believing we are honest, hardworking, or health conscious. But then reality happens. You pledge to drink 8 glasses of water a day, yet by lunchtime you are ordering a sugary soda. When you break your rules, there is no physical warning light flashing in your vision. Instead, you experience a subtle, uncomfortable tightening in your stomach. This invisible tension is called cognitive dissonance. It is the psychological discomfort we feel when our actions directly misalign with our core beliefs. If you ignore that internal alarm, it bypasses your conscious control. It forces us into behaviors we would normally reject, bending our own perception of reality to protect our ego and identity. The mechanics of this glitch are predictable. Holding 2 opposing pieces of information triggers psychological pain. To relieve that tension, the brain distorts reality. In the 1950s, psychologist Leon Festinger set up a laboratory experiment to measure exactly how far the mind would go to resolve this internal conflict. Subjects spent an hour completing a deliberately tedious, mind-numbing task. Afterward, researchers asked them to lie to the next group of participants, instructing them to claim the experiment was highly entertaining. For telling this lie, one group was offered $20. The other group was offered just $1. The group paid $20 lied, took the money, and felt fine. The high monetary reward provided a rational, objective justification for their dishonesty. The mental math worked, and they experienced no dissonance. But the group paid a single dollar, experienced internal conflict. A dollar was not enough to justify compromising their integrity. To resolve the pain, their brains rewrote the past. They convinced themselves that the tedious task was genuinely fun, altering their own memories to make a cheap lie feel like the truth. We twist our logic into impossible shapes today to fit whatever narrative makes us comfortable. Think about signing up for an extravagant personal trainer. When a friend points out you could get the same workout at a cheaper gym, you rarely admit the mistake. You invent specific benefits about how your trainer is uniquely brilliant, a mechanism known as effort justification. Or consider making plans to go out, only to see it raining. You choose to stay home and instantly convince yourself that going out would have been exhausting anyway. You use the spreading of alternatives, widening the gap between the 2 choices to make the rejection of your friends feel logical. Dissonance is the painful feeling, but the tools we use to fix it were formally mapped out in the 1970s by behavioral economists and psychologists, including Daniel Kahneman. This diagram illustrates how the central tension of cognitive dissonance branches out into specific mental shortcuts, which behavioral economists identified as cognitive biases. These include the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to stick with a bad decision because we have already invested resources into it, as well as confirmation bias and the halo effect. These pathways function as strict, unconscious filters. They actively block out objective facts, allowing only comforting information to pass through to your conscious mind. These biases successfully drop the psychological pressure in the short term. However, relying on them traps you in a continuous cycle of systemic errors and self-deception. Navigating reality through biased filters carries a heavy long-term cost. Living outside of your own integrity degrades your mental health and psychological well-being. This unresolved internal conflict frequently leaks out into your behavior. You might find yourself defensive, jealous of a peer's success, or responding with sudden hostility to gentle, constructive criticism. Breaking this cycle requires what psychologists call consonant action. Consonant action means modifying your behavior to match your values, rather than bending reality to excuse your mistake. You can implement a practical framework to do this. First, pay attention to the physical sensation. Notice when you get that defensive tightening in your stomach. Second, investigate what triggered it, without making excuses or rejecting the facts. Next, you have a choice. You can either rationalize the lapse or admit the contradiction and change your behavior. Finally, seek external accountability. Talking through your decisions with a coach helps identify the blind spots you cannot see on your own. Acknowledge cognitive dissonance as an internal compass. This tension provides the signal we need to navigate back toward a life of purpose, clarity, and integrity.